are back. You're listening to You Would Think, the Philadelphia Flyers podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Collington, and joining me this morning, as usual, you know by now, it's the one and only Mr. Kevin Durso. How are you, buddy?
I'm doing well.
Yeah, it was a bit of a weird week. The Flyers played a couple of games since our last show, and they lost most of them. And that's kind of been the story for a month or so here, is that the Flyers are losing a lot of games. But we can, if we want, talk about some silver linings. There was a decent effort against the Pittsburgh Penguins on Thursday, and then not a terrible effort against Washington on Saturday. You know, it could have been way worse, I guess. Listen, I'm looking. I said silver linings. All right, no, either that or we're doom and gloom all show again.
Well, no, your silver linings probably become more about individuals than it becomes about team result at that point. Like,
and we'll talk about a specific silver lining as we can even get into that now here if you want.
Well, there were two, and I guess since you mentioned the Thursday game, we can start with the fact that Carter Hart played well in that game and basically won the game for them. I mean, that's what you need to see. Now, of course, the unfortunate part is as you know, Saturday morning hit and he's not feeling right, so he sat out the game. I assume he's out tonight too. I mean, Elliott's going to start anyway. That was the plan.
Right. Well, and the nice thing is now you're out of the playoff contention. So at this point, give Carter Hart all the time he needs. There's no rush. If the Flyers are still in the thick of the playoff race, Brian Elliott probably would have started Saturday. You know, you try to get Carter Hart right for Sunday. You're throwing everybody off. Everybody's off schedule. Now, no problem. Take the foot off the gas pedal. Alex Lyon gets the start. And yeah, sure, he kind of gets lit up, but he's Alex Lyon. That's kind of what we expect from him at this point. Well, sorry, Alex.
Well, and not only that, but he barely got any time. He found out 2 hours before the game.
Right.
If you're finding out 2 hours before the game, pretty much, that this is your start, and you're a guy who, by the way, has made how many starts since last April?
And not May
or March or whatever. Like, the guy barely played. So
right.
Credit to him for stepping in and doing the job and accepting the challenge.
Right. And I wasn't disparaging Alex Lyon because I do think he's a solid goaltender, and I think there's a world where he develops into a decent little backup when Brian Elliott moves on. At the current moment, though, Alex Lyon is an AHL guy. You know, there's a reason he's on the taxi squad. There's a reason he's not exactly on your main roster. And when he gets a start with 2 hours notice against a team as good as the Washington Capitals, Alexander Ovechkin's going to beat him a couple of times, and he did.
I mean, look, there was so much that was predictable about that. Ovechkin even scoring in the game was predictable. Them scoring, and it was Ovechkin again, but them scoring after Nick Aube-Kubel takes another penalty.
Yep.
Predictable. I mean, the defensive, realistically, at that point in time, then he gave up 3 goals that were, you know, one of them hits a shin pad on the way in, so that's why it goes in.
Yep.
And one of them's a defensive breakdown, so Evgeny Kuznetsov has nobody on him at all, so go ahead and be your skilled self at that point.
And it's one of the better shots on a very skilled team. Like, Evgeny Kuznetsov can score some goals.
Right, it was, and as good, you're saying that, like, as good as Ovechkin is, right? Like,
that too.
And then the deflection by Sherry is what it is. I mean, they were pressing again. It was a 1-goal game, and they're pressing, and they find a way to get that goal. And
yeah, Lyon didn't play poorly by any stretch.
No, I mean, Alex Lyon made 35 saves in that game.
Yeah.
So when you face 40 shots, because they had 41 total, but one of them was an empty net goal, so obviously.
Right.
So when you face 40 shots, you know, you're not getting off easy there. I mean, that, and especially when you were thrown into action, kind of. Like, that's, you know, all things considered, that's a decent day. I mean, like,
right.
The fact that they even pulled you at the end of the game to say, come to the bench, there's still...
Let's try to get a win here. Yeah.
There's still a shot in some way. You at least kept them in the game. And, I mean, there's not a goal in there that I would say, you know, I mean, look, there were people who said, oh, you know, he didn't play the Ovechkin goals. Well, like, don't give me any of that when he's a third stringer who is playing against the best goal scorer of this generation.
730 goalies have played that poorly in the past. Give Alex Lyon a break.
Well,
right?
Not exactly 730, but 730 times people have screwed up there. Yes.
Okay, Alex Lyon scoring from that spot, it might not be 730, but it might be well into the 600s the way he scores.
I hear you. Well,
it seems like all his goals are from that spot.
Well, from that spot, sure, but I'm saying he's faced a lot of the same goalies
Absolutely.
over the years. And,
I know.
And guess what? Like, do it this way. Has Henrik Lundqvist allowed goals to him on a regular basis during his prime years? Has Marc-Andre Fleury allowed goals to him during his prime years?
Did Martin Brodeur allow goals to him during,
take your pick, Braden Holtby, Tuukka Rask. They play these teams regularly, and he scores all the time.
The best goalies of the last 2 decades have all let Alex Ovechkin score on them at one time or another.
Pretty much, and he look, I just continue to go. I've seen him a number of times. I marvel at his shot. I just think, it's always. I believe I remember. I don't know if I said it on here, but when they moved us back upstairs, when the fans were allowed back in, it was right before Washington came to Philly for the first time this year,
right.
and I was disappointed because my vantage point prior to that, down lower level,
you were staring down the Ovechkin spot.
I'm practically looking down the lane that the shot would come, and I just wanted to see it from that spot.
Just once.
To watch it from that vantage point and see how fast the thing takes off, because he's just incredible. And that's his second 2-goal game this season against the Flyers. He's got 8 total in 6 games, I believe. Yeah,
players are doing I feel like players are doing severe damage against the Flyers this year, right? Think about what Mika Zibanejad's done. Think about what Alex Ovechkin's done. Think about what Patrice Bergeron has done against the Philadelphia Flyers this season.
Or David Pastrnak, yeah.
Right. For whatever reason, star players are absolutely torching the Flyers this year.
Because I think that has to do with if you've got them, then you need them to be successful. Yep. I don't think every team that's in, if we just look at specifically every team that's in the East picture right now, I don't know if the Islanders have a star player the way that the other 3 teams do.
You could argue Matt Barzal's a star player, but I get what you're saying.
I call him a superstar, but you could make the argument that Barzal's not in the category with the other guys we can mention from the other 3 teams.
He hasn't produced on that level consistently enough to necessarily be there yet. Yeah.
Sure, and well, not only that, but realistically, has he lit up the Flyers this year? Not really. I mean, he's not the goal scorer. I mean, he's making plays, but he's not scoring the goals like that. So you go Bergeron, Pastrnak, Marchand for Boston, the usual trio. Then you go
Taylor Hall.
Well,
we'll talk.
We will, but they don't play him again with that. So we don't know if Taylor Hall will be there next year. And by that point anyway, they'll play the Boston Bruins 3 times again.
I have a feeling Taylor Hall will be there next year. Just the circumstances regarding how Taylor Hall got to Boston. But anyway.
Well, I'm going to tell you yes and no, and I'll tell you why. Yes, I think he's enjoying it there. Yes, I think he'd be willing to go back. He's going to have to take a massive pay cut.
I think he's willing to.
And if he is, more power to him then, because then all of a sudden I will change my tune on the way I felt about him when he went to Buffalo, because going to Buffalo for $8 million,
that was a selfish move. Yeah,
was kind of, as much as we'll talk about that in a little bit, but
we have a trade.
We'll get into that, but he said
we have a trade deadline conversation queued up for a little bit later. In the meantime, you mentioned the one glowing star of the week, and that was Carter Hart looking really solid Thursday against the Penguins.
Carter Hart I believe he only started 1 game this week. He only started Thursday.
Right, but he looked fantastic, we were talking about.
And it would have been great it would have been great if we would have gotten to see him follow it up and play Saturday.
Absolutely.
It was the expectation. It might have, quite honestly, who knows? It might have been a closer game.
It would have quieted a lot of the conversation that we've had about Carter Hart having such a poor season if he can come back out and put 2 good back-to-back performances together. And, obviously we didn't get a chance to see that. But the other star this week, we had a Philadelphia Flyer make their NHL debut. Kevin, tell our listeners, if they don't know, who's Wade Allison?
Well, Wade Allison was a 2nd-round pick a few years back. I believe it was 2016. And he, this is a guy who, first of all, as a college prospect, this is what happens. There's a lot of people going, 2016? How come I don't even remember?
Right, it's 5 years ago. I've never heard this guy's name. Who is this? Right.
This is what college prospects go through, because you determine how long you want to play in college. And you could be the Cam York type who goes and plays for two seasons in college and turns around and then says, I'm going pro.
Right.
And those guys who go pro after that are, they're still 21 years old, and they've been out of the draft for 2 years, and they're 20, 21 years old. And they've been out of the draft for 2 years, and you go, oh, now they're here. Okay. That's quite honestly, that almost follows the same path as the junior kids to an extent.
Right. It's a first round pick. He went back to another team for a couple of years. Now he joined your team. Cool. That's how it works. That's how it works for a lot of these junior players.
So when you get these guys like Tanner Lazinski and now Wade Allison, who not only were college prospects, but played their 4-year careers.
They went through college.
They went through. They graduated. They did all that stuff. You got one. Lazinski was Ohio State. You have, and now Wade Allison was Western Michigan.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong. They could have gone through their college careers, not signed with the Flyers, and chosen a team. Correct? They could have gone the Jimmy VC route, or there are a couple of college guys who have done kind of similar things.
Yeah, sure. And I mean, look, here's the thing about it too. It depends on your response to, I guess, the process of going through the college system, and also what you can do at other, like Wade Allison and Tanner Lazinski were able to, for the most part. I don't want to make it seem like they were there every single year, or that they didn't, like, because both guys have battled through injury stuff before. They've been to development camps. Like, they're still allowed to go to development camp as a player with it, on the team who has their rights.
They just can't make any money because it's the NCAA.
Right, and that's why when the season actually starts, they're not able to just sit there and say, "Oh, let's," like, I know there's a lot being made. I'm not trying to shift gears from Wade Allison and Tanner Lazinski as college kids to a different level here, but there's a lot being made about Tyson Forrester and Zade Wisdom, and we like those players, don't get me wrong. They've been a lot of fun to watch at the minor league level.
A lot of fun to watch, yeah.
But they're only in the minors right now because of a technicality. They're only there because the OHL is the only Canadian junior league that's not back yet, because Ontario has totally different restrictions and government guidelines and things like that than the other places do. And that creates, this sort of kind of creates this situation to an extent. But like what you're getting at is that at this point in time, you've gone this far. We're talking from January, trying to return to play. The AHL comes back. It's February. They've been playing for 2 months. Now they haven't been playing for almost 2 weeks, and that's a whole nother story. I mean, let's just be glad that Wade Allison's here. Be glad that Tanner Lazinski's here. Be glad that, there's possibilities for other guys who may have escaped this, that they're able to come up and practice.
Well, that's why Cam York hasn't made his debut, right? Because the Phantoms haven't played in 2 weeks.
So get this, and this was a kind of late night thing for me, but so Cam York has not made his pro debut yet, correct? He was supposed to. I believe he signed. When did he sign? On the 7th, I think it was.
So we did our show. We did our show last Sunday. He was supposed to make his debut with the Phantoms the night prior.
Right, that weekend.
The Saturday prior.
He signed, I believe, on like the Wednesday of that week, and
Wednesday or Thursday,
or something like that. And then not only that, but right after that, it was the word came out about the assignment to the Phantoms, and everybody was basically sitting here. And I believe he did have one practice. I think that because they practice on Friday, the 9th, I guess it would have been. And they practiced on the 9th, and he was supposed to, or he should have been, as far as I know, on the ice participating, getting ready. And the thought was he's going to make his debut on Saturday.
The plan was that he was going to make his debut on Saturday, and that game got pulled fairly quickly before puck drop, right?
Not really quickly before puck drop, but I do think it was morning of.
Oh, okay. I thought it was later in the afternoon. I'm sorry. Okay.
No, it was morning of, because there was a 2:00 Flyer game last Saturday because they played.
Maybe
Boston.
That's what I'm thinking of. It threw me off.
It was either before I left or right as I went to go leave and get down there. So we're talking 12:30. That's when I think the word came out. At least Saturday was off. Either before I got home from the game that day, or maybe not long after. Sunday was off the table.
Sunday was off too,
and
right?
Then shortly thereafter, it was Wednesday's gone, Saturday, Sunday, the following weekend gone, like all that. So it was,
Now they're officially just trying to get back on the ice at this point. So
yeah.
So either way, Cam York hasn't made his debut yet. Thankfully, we do have these players that have had the opportunity to skate with the Phantoms for a little while before they kind of paused out, and we ended up getting Wade Allison coming up.
Well, so anyway, back to Cam York for 1 second, because this was the late night thing I was talking about. Apparently, and I haven't seen anything from the team yet, it's still kind of early on Sunday. The game isn't until 6:30. Pre-game media avail is probably going to be late afternoon, like 4-ish or something like that. Cam York, according to Cap Friendly, was moved up to the Flyers taxi squad last night.
Oh, that's very interesting.
Now, I turned around and before everybody freaked out, and because there were a lot of people going, so one person went, "Oh, York tomorrow," and another one went, "Probably not, but maybe like later this week." Or whatever, or like late. Actually, like,
well, you got a couple days off. Now he can come up and practice with the NHL squad, practice with Elaine Vigneault, and then next week you have 4 games against the New Jersey Devils. What better time to break a kid in?
Well, here's the thing about that. they're on a COVID pause right now. The Phantoms are. So he's not playing games. He's not even practicing. So I think that this is also possibly a technicality to say,
just get him up so he can practice.
The taxi squad guys get to practice. So maybe you just get him skating so that if you have intention, because now let's put it this way, you've played 2 games already. You played Thursday and you played since pretty much, let's go back to even earlier this week since our last show. You played Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. You're playing again Sunday. By the time you're done on Sunday, you have 11 games left. If you have 11 games left, 2 more coming up rapid fire this weekend. Thursday, Friday, right on there, and then another one on Sunday, and then you're back into basically the final 2 weeks.
Right.
If you want him to play in the final 2 weeks of the season to see what he's got at this level, then you just got to get him on the ice. Well, you got to get him on the ice. So at the very least, you can call him up. They're not going to practice tomorrow because of a back-to-back, but they will practice on Tuesday and Wednesday leading into Thursday. Why not get him on the ice on Tuesday, Wednesday, maybe on the ice Thursday, not with the rest of the team, but go skate Friday. You could, in a way, by making him practice that much, if you wanted to, set him up for a home debut on the following Sunday again.
Yeah, I don't hate it.
If you wanted to. I don't think he's playing tonight. I don't think he's playing later this week, but I think a week from now, if he skates exclusively with the team and gives them something that they feel is impressive enough, it's possible. Now, I don't love the idea. I would have loved for him to have had, let's put it this way. If he would have had, I believe by now he might have had 5 AHL games or would have been on
You'd feel a lot better if he played 5 games and looked good. You'd feel a lot better about maybe giving him a chance to skate with the big boys for a couple before the season ends here.
I don't love the idea of, kind of in the same vein as a Wade Allison. I don't love the idea of making him, debut on the road. Because you do have some fans in the building, and quite frankly, right now, as I mentioned a little bit last week, you could kind of use just about anything you could to get people to come in and want to see this team.
Well, I was going to say,
player.
I think that if you see Cam York this season and moving him to the tax squad again indicates that they're interested in at least getting him a little bit of time with the NHL team in some capacity.
But what I'm saying is that if he would have started last weekend. He would have played Saturday, or Friday, Saturday, or Saturday, Sunday. I'm sorry, it was Saturday, Sunday. So he would have played Saturday, Sunday. They had a game on Wednesday that got moved. I think again this weekend it would have been a Saturday, Sunday deal or Friday, Saturday, or one of those, right?
Right.
And my point is that if you would have started this process where, again, you give him one more pro weekend and say next Friday, Saturday, Sunday, you're down there, and after that, get ready.
You're up here, right?
But get ready for Tuesday. But Tuesday's a road game, so I kind of that's the only thing that shied me away from that.
Yeah, I think if you're going to see Cam York before the end of the season, and I think you're going to see it at home because I think the team knows it needs a little bit of PR right now. It needs something good to get excited about.
Now, depending on when the Phantoms are out of their situation, by the way, you could circle May 1st, which is a home game, and say there's 6 games left at that point in the season. You're in all of them. And
that's a good spot to bring them up at that point, right? Because you're looking at New Jersey, a back against Pittsburgh, both at home, a back-to-back against Washington, both on the road, and then New Jersey again at home to finish it out. Now, he probably won't play all 4 of those games against Pittsburgh and Washington just because they're on back-to-backs, and again, young kid, you're probably not going to.
I don't know. I think they would, to be honest. I think they would, and they'd rather...
I think the fact that you have 7, 8, 9 defensemen that you're circling around, I don't know. I don't think you play them back to back against a heavy team like Washington. When the kid has 3 games under his shift, do you really want him going up against these monsters in Washington back to back nights just getting destroyed? I don't know. That's just me.
And I know.
And we got to see how he looks. Obviously.
Well, and there's people who sit there and say, "Don't subject him to this. Don't whatever." You're never gonna know until you bring him up, though. I agree. This is how. Let's do it this way. Would you, if Rasmus Dahlin was a prospect? Let's say he was a prospect again instead of the first overall pick, jumping right in. Would you call him up right now if you were Buffalo and say, "Just you got the rest of the season? The games don't." No, I'm saying, but no. Well, hold on. Truthfully, the games don't matter. You're on the ice for 20 minutes. You play to the best of your own abilities, and even if the team gets shelled 5-0 with the other 4 guys that go out there, we just want to see you. He's not responsible for the whole thing. This goes back to honestly, I see people I saw people who like I've seen people who talk about Claude Giroux this way and sit there and go, I don't know why people defend him. He hasn't done anything as captain, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, you're one player. This is the ultimate team sport. So I don't care if he's playing with a team that you don't like the looks of it or whatever. We all know. Everybody knows, people in the organization, people outside of the organization, know how much work is going to need to be done in the offseason. But that's where you got to start, because if he's got a spot next year and he can solve part of your problem, you got to give it a shot.
So if you're Elaine Vigneault,
yeah,
and Chuck Fletcher comes to you and says, hey, we're calling up Cam York. We want to see him get some time. We want to see what the kid has before the end of the season. Who are you playing him with? Who's his defense partner? Because the easy answer is Ivan Provorov, right? If you want to see what the kid can do, put him next to Ivan Provorov. Ivan Provorov will play solid fundamental hockey, and Cam York can show off whatever skill he's got.
No, that's not the easy answer, because they're both lefties, so I don't see that happening. It might be Justin Braun, believe it or not, and I say that because Braun's probably been as bad as this is going to be, like, going to sound to people, and it's the reality of the situation. So don't shoot the messenger here. Justin Braun's been the most consistent defenseman his team's had all year. And
I think that's fair to say.
And I'm not saying that doesn't mean I'm saying he's good. I'm just telling you that this year, with the problems they've had on the back end, he's probably been the most consistent, and that's why he's not subjected to the possibility of being removed from the lineup unless he's hurting. Because, they're not scratching Provorov, they're not scratching Braun, they're not scratching Sanheim. It comes down to, is Moran playing? Is Haig playing? Is Myers playing?
Is Gostisbehere playing?
Is Gostisbehere playing? Is somebody else? Is insert name here playing, right?
Right. Now, speaking of guys that we could see get a chance this year, and while we're kind of discussing defensemen here, what's the word on Igor Zamula?
Now, he's been battling something, from what I understand.
Oh, he has been.
He was hurt a little bit in the minors, so I don't know. See, look, obviously, again, back to the Phantom situation, not trying to make this, and we're totally taking away from what we started with, which was Wade Allison, which I will get back into, I promise. But he's, now that you've had 2 weeks, almost, since your last practice, he's getting a lot of time to just heal up at this point, for whatever it is. If he wasn't playing, I think
can't be a bad thing.
I think he was in and out of the lineup. I think it's just a nagging thing. I don't think it's anything that was long term. I just think it was, you never know, kind of. I think it was more of like a day-to-day type of situation that just continued to linger for a while. That's my best guess. But I know that let's put it this way, they gave him a tease to an extent when they put him in for that preseason game in the bubble and just said, you're getting a shot just to look at you. And he
looked solid.
And he didn't play for the rest of the playoffs, but he got one shot with NHL players. I mean, that's still a lineup with Crosby and all that on the other side, because they played Pittsburgh that game. And he didn't play a lot, but got a shot, and that's all you can ask for, right? So that's where the situation lies for now, and you go from there to an extent. I mean, if he's available, wouldn't be shocked if they tried to get him up there, but obviously right now one of the things they've got is Cam York just played a college season and called it a college career, and they need him to skate, and they know he's
a recent first-round pick, and let's see what he's got.
And not only that, but when right around the same time that little, that tweet came out from Cap Friendly that it was a transaction that was made, doesn't mean we have any confirmation from the team, doesn't mean anybody else has said anything. It just happened to show up on Cap Friendly.
Right.
There was people, I saw a video clip come into play from World Juniors, and they go, look at Cam York take on the much taller and stronger Quentin Byfield and take care of him and just take him out of the play with just a good positioning play. He might be close to being, he is a college kid, so he played older talent. It's not like he's it's not like he's the 20-year-old playing 18-year-olds. He's the 20-year-old playing everybody. The
difference between college and juniors is, instead of 16-year-olds playing with 19-year-olds, it's 19-year-olds playing with 22-year-olds. Basically. So instead of being the biggest fish in a small pond in juniors, you're kind of a smaller fish in the larger pond of the NCAA.
But this is, as we've already said, this is the type of stuff that will exactly get people a little bit amped up to come out and see these games. Not that there's a lot of stuff going on with that anyway, and not a lot of people can come in, but if you want to have some interest in this, you've got to start showcasing the guys who might be here next year to help out. And it sure sounded like, by all accounts, when they had Cam York do a press availability. It sure sounded like it wasn't just like we're going to give him a shot at the NHL this year and then go from there. It was they're kind of trying to groom him for next year's roster in a way.
Well, sure, and why wouldn't you at this point, right? We're looking at this team, and what have we been talking about all season long, right? We still don't have a Matt Niskanen replacement, and maybe he's not that right away, obviously, because I think it's a little presumptuous to think that the kid can step into a top pair role right away. But at the same time, you're looking that left such a hole, right? And immediately we started talking about, okay, who goes and fills that role? Okay, does Phil Myers go up? Okay, when Phil Myers go up, who plays with Travis Sanheim? And maybe Cam York slots in that kind of spot, right? And one of those guys, Sanheim or Myers, or if Ghost continues playing well, or whoever's up playing with Provorov next year, maybe Cam York slides down, and if he plays as well as the team is hoping that he can play, he can kind of slot down there in the top 4 somewhere.
Here's the thing with this, and I kind of now we're still back to shifting gears. We're still not on.
We're still on Cam York. Sorry.
No, it's not. No, it's not on Cam. It's not on Cam York. Well, this kind of works with Wade Allison too, to an extent.
Yeah.
When we watch prospects, one of the things that really needs to change collectively, fan wise, management wise, everything is this almost overvaluing, I called it, of players, because why did we all assume that Phil Myers was going to jump into the top pairing spot? Because we thought we were seeing the growth the right way, and we went, he's really continuing to progress along, and now we think he's ready for that that kind of workload and that responsibility.
Right, because we saw the season before, we saw a player take an expanded role and jump on it and look good, and the more minutes he got, the better he looked. So we assumed that would continue into 22 minutes a night, 24 minutes a night.
Right, but what I'm trying to get at is that, like, to an extent, what I'm trying to get at is every defenseman this team has drafted has been, oh, that guy could be a number 1 or a top pairing guy, and every forward they've drafted has been that guy could be your new, top 6, one of your top 6 guys, something like that. And maybe top 6 is reasonable sometimes, but like you're shooting for the highest of the high when you've got to balance out. Like for example, you finally kind of figured it out with Shane Gostisbehere, right? Like, and I'm not saying he's
Hopefully.
the best. Hold on, and I'm not saying he's the best player, and I'm not saying he should be here next year per se. If they move on from him, they decide to move on from him. I get why, right? But my point is that where has he had his most success? Third pairing, top power play. You divide the minutes up. You give him 10 minutes on the third pairing at even strength. You give him 5 minutes of power play time. You're done. And you can give him more than 10 minutes of even strength time if the result allows. Why did the Flyers play last year the way they did and roll 4 lines and 3 D pairs the way they did? Because they got into third periods of games and
because
went
you
up.
could.
Well, because they got into third periods of games and went up 4-1, and you go, well, we got this one in control. Let's just keep doing what we're doing, and you don't have to do anything complex and tricky about it. You can just roll the lines, and you don't have to and you didn't have to shake up the lines regularly either. They're doing that an awful lot this year. So it's almost like the light bulb should go off when, oh, you mean to tell me Shane Gostisbehere plays better when he's utilized properly? Who knew, right?
What a concept. Players play better when they're in their role.
So what's the problem if Phil Myers' ceiling is third pairing right defenseman? What's the problem if Travis Sanheim's ceiling is where he is, second pairing? What's the problem if Ivan Provorov isn't a number 1 but a number 2? And you say he's the second guy, now you need the number 1 who goes next to him.
Right.
Like, you've got to figure that stuff out. Like, I feel like we're doing that with just about everybody. Like, and we're trying our best not to get too over the top with Joel Farabee right now, because Joel Farabee's having a good year, and you go, don't put him on the top line just yet, though. It's 1 year, and it's his second year in the league. Don't go that far. Like, to be honest with you, Travis Konechny had an outstanding year last year, was an all-star, and everybody went, well, there's one of your top-line wingers. There's your goal scorer, right? I would say safely, granted, I was having this conversation a little bit, and I'm like, you know what? If there's any player who, and I know that people don't want to hear COVID and all that stuff like that, but if there's any player I give the COVID excuse to this year from a production standpoint, it's Konechny. Because Konechny doesn't go out and score 24 goals each of the last 3 years and then come out and go ice cold.
No.
And go on the COVID list in that year and all that stuff. It doesn't happen by coincidence. I think he's feeling, I think the amount of games they're playing and the way the schedule broke down and the fact that he was on the COVID list all factor in. And I would say get him to next year and give, like, now granted, do I curb my expectations? Absolutely. I sit there and I say he could be a really good 25 goal scorer who plays on the second line. and power play, and that's what he is.
He could be what James Van Riemsdyk was in Toronto.
A little more, because I think he's got the chops. Because as a skater, he's got the chops to play a better role than Van Riemsdyk does.
That's fair.
It's weird. He's a chippy player, and he can be that energy, feisty kind of guy. But
he can be Brad Marchand if he needs to.
Yes, but see, yes and no, because he can be that attitude, but he's not physically capable like Marchand is. He doesn't have. Does Marchand have more skill than Travis Konechny? Probably, right? Again, Marchand has more skill because of what we see in the shootout. To be quite honest,
right? Well, except for when he just grazes the top of the puck.
Yeah, that was the exception, not the rule, because he's gone in and done a lot of things better than that.
Okay, speaking of shootouts, we're here and we're going to get back to Wade Allison in just a second, I promise. But I have to mention the shootout moves from Claude Giroux and Sean Couturier. That Sean Couturier move, that little Marty St. Louis flip to the back skate, backhand flip at top shelf. Man, it's nice seeing that level of skill from a Flyers forward, even if it's in the worst way to determine a hockey game that's ever existed.
I want to go in order because Giroux's was first, and it's not that Giroux's was anything overly outrageous. It's a nice move. Now, hold on a minute. The thing I think with that one was not that it's not a move that's never been seen before, but how often does he do that? He's either go to the backhand guy, or just let it go.
Right.
He's not really the I'm going to find a way to cut back on my forehand and make that move. I mean, that was a little, kind of to an extent, that was a little bit Danny Briere-esque in a way.
That was Claude Giroux showing us all that even at, 32, 33, something along those lines, even in his early 30s, Cap still got some new tricks. He's not solved yet.
And I wish that people, everybody wants him off the team practically, the way it sounds. And I wish that people would just understand that half of the battle is if you were to put him on a lesser role, if he still wasn't regarded as the top guy, because that's what the problem is. I mean, and I'm
still look at him as the guy who should be having 102 points and leading the team to the playoffs and anchoring the 2012 playoff run, and he's just not, right? The famous torch passing, right? That torch never got passed. Sorry, Sam. That tweet hasn't aged well.
I got asked this question earlier this week on 97.3, and I think this is a fair thing to bring up, because there's people who sit there and go, what is his legacy, whatever, all this, and I turned and said, one of the things about him as a captain that I think it did him a disservice is who he came after. Because I even said, he's not different from any other captain this team has had in terms of the style with which he leads. He's not different from any other captain they've had in the last 20 years. Yep. Eric Lindros did not go in and give speeches and yell at people. He went out and played hard. Keith Primo did not go in and necessarily give speeches. He just played hard. Mike Richards was go out and lay a big hit on somebody, go make a play, and everybody get behind me and follow the leader, please. Right. But he didn't go in and give rah-rah speeches. Then you got Chris Pronger. And Chris Pronger got in there, and when the microphone was in front of him, or when it was not,
he had no problem.
He was willing to call out players. He was willing to get in front of the media and have an attitude and be snarky and do all
There's
that
a reason he got a job as a public figure for the league after he retired. He's a good speaker, and he knows it.
But not only that, he had a different style, and people embrace the fact that if something wasn't right, you know how many times people probably still go to the game against, I believe it was against Calgary, where they get the overtime goal called back. He's standing in front of the goalie, and the media's asking him, well, what were you doing there trying to put, and he goes, what does it matter? The puck went in the net. I wasn't doing anything in front of him that I shouldn't have been. It went in the net. It should have been a goal. And the snap back with that to even just, and that has nothing to do with a teammate, has nothing to do with leading the team. It just has to do with the media asking a question. But he went right at it right there. And and there was that whole story about him. I believe him and Giroux, when Giroux was a younger guy.
A story that Giroux has told. Yeah.
Right. And calling him out and things like that. But is anybody going in there right now and again, we're trying to get back to Thursday when Wade Allison debuted, but let's go back to Tuesday. Is anybody going in there after that yet another 6-1 loss, the 5th time this year by that score, and going, does anybody care anymore? Do you care about how this looks?
No. And I think, I don't know what it is. I really don't know. Yeah, I think we want Alain Vigneault to be the one doing it, but it's got to come from the players at this point.
But Alain Vigneault,
that's not his responsibility.
But Alain Vigneault's not John Tortorella, okay?
Right.
Like, you can't have... And again,
he's not even John Quenneville. In terms of, I think John Quenneville.
Joel Quenneville.
Joel Quenneville, I'm sorry.
No, there is a John Quenneville. That's the
there
thing. John
is, you're
Quenneville's
right.
like some low-end defenseman or something like that.
I know.
No, but like here, all right. So here's the thing about that. Again, is there a little bit of a precedent set by a previous coach that makes everybody want that person to be that? Like, does everybody just like? It sounds to me like most of the modern day fans, and even some of the ones who are a little old school, want some old school vibe and basically want Chris Pronger back as captain.
I was about to say, you just mentioned Chris Pronger. You talk old school. That is that is the last remaining definition of old school hockey.
So, no, I feel like they want Chris Pronger back as captain, and they want the guy who was on the other bench on Saturday back as the head coach. They want Peter Laviolette back.
Yeah.
To an extent. And like, I'm not sitting here saying like, the best thing. The best thing that could have happened to Alain Vigneault was last season when he was the new guy. Was that the fact that they had cameras all over the place for training camp because
behind the glass.
When you saw him skating around, sitting here going,
be a bleeping flyer.
Well, not even that. Skating out of practice on the ice, skating around going, we're going to do it again because it's not good enough. And he's calling everybody and he's yelling at him and things like that. And people are seeing that fire and they're going, ooh, there's no nonsense. Because what was the whole thing? And okay, not Craig Berube, not Scott Gordon, but what was, it was Dave Haxtell was supposed to be this no-nonsense guy, and did he turn out to be a no-nonsense guy? Not really, And
turns out Dave Haxtell was an accountant, and you could just run him over in a heartbeat. I was a supporter of him, but Dave Haxtell wasn't exactly a strong personality.
The more that went on, the more you could see it wasn't a natural fit.
Right.
And here's the thing. I think Dave Haxtell can coach in this league as an assistant. Like, I think he can be a good assistant coach at the NHL level. I think I think Chris Knobloch can be a good assistant at this level.
I think Dave Haxtell has the mind to be an NHL coach. I don't know if Dave Haxtell has the fire to be an NHL coach. I never saw him. There was nothing. There was never... If Dave Haxtell comes in and delivers your Game 7 Stanley Cup speech, it's like, all right, guys, we're going to go out there and we're going to play really hard and we're going to execute our game plan and then we're going to win. All right, let's go, boys. And that's the speech. That's it. And that's just not good enough, right? We talk about, does anybody care? And I think we wanted Alain Vigneault to come in and kind of be that fiery voice of, I care, I'm here to... But it doesn't seem to be carrying through, at least on the ice.
I mean, I should, I wish I would have thought of it in hindsight. I just thought of it now because as I'm watching that 6-1 game, knowing that it's, getting out of hand more and more. Saturday didn't get out of hand enough for me to do it because it was always close. It was 1-1, 2-2. 4-2, closed to 4-3, and then ultimately, it wasn't more than a 2-goal game at any point until after.
No, it was fairly competitive for a while
until the end, until the empty net goal. So that's when it became a 3-goal loss. But it's the scene from Slapshot, and it's not a coach. It's the owner who comes down and goes, "We're losing. They're burying us alive," and it's like, how many times can we say that about this team? Like, where do you want that to be? Anybody, you want it to be Chuck Fletcher, you want it to be Dave Scott, you want it to be whatever, and go, they're burying us alive out there for crying out loud. Like that's Ed Snyder for you, like all those years ago, where it was like 9-0 and 8-3 and 7-3 and 6-1 does not sit well with people who especially when I didn't realize this when I walked into the building yesterday for the 6-3 loss to Washington, but I didn't realize I was going to a Washington Capitals home game. Kind of enjoyable.
It did sound like a lot of Capitals fans on the broadcast.
I mean, it was loud in there, and they came prepared. They came with there was at least down the end where I was. There's cowbells going off. I heard multiple CAPS caps chants.
Oof, that's a rough chant, by the way.
That. During the anthem, you heard them all yell red.
Here's the thing. We talked about it. It's a perfect storm for situations like that because we're talking about limited seating that they're already having a hard time filling, right? We made some allusions on our last show to quite a lot of complimentary tickets. Washington's not that far. We talked earlier in the show, their fans can't even go to their home games. Why wouldn't you drive 3 hours to Philly? When these tickets are readily available and they're going to hear you because there's nobody in the building. You go to a 20,000 seat building and you're an enemy fan. You can yell stuff, whatever. Your team's not going to hear you. When there's 3,800 people, man, you can go to a road game and talk directly to Alex Ovechkin if you want.
Well, the way I described it too is when Boston was here a week ago. Brad Marchand was the nicest guy in the world because after warm-ups, he stood there for 5 minutes grabbing pucks and trying to find, there's 4 Bruins fans behind, where the tunnel is. And they're far up. They're pretty high up. But he was
chucking them.
But he was just go ahead and throwing them, whatever, and things like that. I mean, I even watched, and I'm not kidding about this, Jeremy Swayman was the starting goalie that day again. And he's throwing a puck. And they lost that. Now, they later on lost that game, but... And let's look like Swayman kept them in the game long enough. It was a good enough game.
He played well.
Yeah, exactly.
He looks like a good little goalie.
He does, and he got his first shutout this week.
Yeah. Okay, let's circle all the way back around. Speaking of players that are rookies making debuts early in their career, let's finally talk about Wade Allison here.
I told you about him.
We talked a little bit about him. He was a second-round pick. He finished his college career. Let's talk about his actual debut.
Well, the first game he didn't score, but he had 4 shots and he was he was just all over the place.
Probably the most active flyer on the ice. It seemed like.
Now maybe up on my part, from my standpoint, but I basically talked a couple times about him, said, "Oh, it won't take him long to score his first goal," and I made him player to watch on Saturday. And what happened? Lo and behold, there he was.
Ding, ding, ding.
There he was, side of the net, wide open. Ready to take a pass from Kevin Hayes and had a wide open net and scored his first goal. And you saw...
It don't get much easier than that.
Well, and I loved what they said on the broadcast when I went back and saw the clip because, they sit there and say, not only does it get any easier than that, like you said, but he didn't just go, oh, look, it's a wide open net, I'll just tap it in.
He tried to put it through the net.
He wanted to put it through the net. Exactly. Yep. So
he didn't want there to be any doubt at all.
So you got that. He... just let it rip, and he's all of 2 feet away from the net. Wade Allison was not social distancing from the net by any stretch. He was right up on it, ready to go.
That's bad.
Okay,
that one's terrible.
Low hanging fruit right now. But he slams this thing. He just absolutely puts everything he has behind it, and then the celebration afterwards. Now already it's a good celebration because you never have this no question about it who scored the goal and who's got his first. But also, you just saw, for a guy who has been hurt so much, for a guy who has waited a long time to get to this point, that's all that.
He reached a pinnacle. He reached a peak there.
But that's all that time and all that effort coming off of his shoulders and going, I can do this at this level. Honest to goodness, I was during the game yesterday, I hopped on. Russ Cohen has a mini podcast, if you will, that he does in between periods where we just sit there. He calls it Two Masked Men. It's really funny, actually. We sit in the press box and just chat. He had me come on yesterday and do it. And he even said, is basically the only question with him whether he stays, he can play 10 to 15 games in a row? Because it's not like he can't play hockey, No,
he certainly can. Also, I wanted to point out, if you're watching on our YouTube channel, YWT Podcast, you will notice that I may or may not have some red hair. And I just wanted to point out, this kid is a ginge. He is translucent. He is see-through. He looks like Jacob Voracek in 2012.
Okay, hang on a second.
Which, by the way, if you haven't seen it, go back and look at a picture. Because Jacob Voracek in 2012, holy.
This is how bad this is. So... he's already got the flow going a little bit.
He's working on it.
No, if he grew out a full beard, I'd want to see a picture of you and him side by side, honestly.
Come on. Listen, I know I'm pale. Mm-hmm. That kid is invisible. Sprinkle a little water on him and he disappears.
Does he reach Danny Briere levels of pale?
Oh, man.
I mean, Danny Briere was... ghost-like.
Yeah, Danny Briere almost looked sick sometimes.
Yeah, I know.
He almost looked sallow.
He doesn't.
Not anymore. No, he looks great now. But when he was in his trimmest state.
No, but I'm saying I think that has to do with when you're on the ice and you're expelling all this energy, but it's also a colder environment.
Right.
I think that had a little something to do with it, because when you see him, suit, press box.
And also, he played so hard, he was probably sweating off 20 pounds a game. Let's be real. Danny Briere.
Or it probably felt like that, but nonetheless, no, I'm serious. If he grew out more of a beard than he has, which I think right now he's got like a little bit like a semi goatee look kind of going, because he's got like the mustache, he's got like the little chin hair.
Well, listen, the kid's very young. He might not be able to grow a full beard yet.
Well, he's in his 20s though. It's not like he's 23.
Listen, I couldn't grow this until I was 23. Listen, Wade, if you're listening, if you hear this, grow the beard. Let's go.
Oh, I could see him doing it. He seems like that type of guy. I mean, he seems very. You know what he seems actually? He seems like a very chill out kind of guy. Like he's very relaxed.
Well, we talked about this team not necessarily caring and needing a little bit of a jump. He may not be the best fit there, but
no. Like I mean, he's relaxed with the stage, I suppose. Like
okay, he seems comfortable.
He doesn't seem mesmerized. I'll tell you that. He looked like he just went out and wanted to play, and he said he was nervous. He said he was nervous on Thursday. But
he looked like he belonged. Like even you see the clip of his little solo warm up lap, and he was smiling the whole time. He knew what he was doing. He was enjoying it. Absolutely. He knew where he was. And it seems like he's been enjoying it pretty much every step of the way.
So that's, but it's exciting to watch him.
And he's looked really solid.
And, they've had injuries lately. And that might be a benefit to him, because they let him play with Claude Giroux and Joel Farabee in the last game. At even strength alone, that will do something for you.
Absolutely.
Then go on the power play, and it's Giroux, it's Hayes. Giroux, Hayes. I think Provorov was on the back end. He's got talent around him in that area. You know what I mean? Like he's got good players around him. So it really shouldn't be a surprise. He's always been around the net. And I know a lot of other people feel the same way. I don't love him at net front, because that's not really like. Let's do it this way. He just scored his first goal by virtually he scored his first goal Wayne Simmons style. Okay, that's not really what he's known for. He scored a goal in his first professional game in the AHL by taking a ridiculous shot.
I remember it.
Get him in a spot where he can let a shot go. And, maybe right now it's not what they need. Like, they're trying to put him in a good role.
Right.
But maybe, you got to work on that stuff. And you got to get him into his natural fit somehow. Like, and you know what's a shame? And because there was somebody I saw a tweet come out that was like, when did Joel Farabee stop being the guy who shoots or whatever? Because he had a shot to shoot a puck last game and didn't.
Right.
But here's the thing: he had Allison kind of coming with him, and you go, if you got a guy with that kind of shot with you, and he's already scored in this game, and he's probably been the player with the most jump in the last 2 games, aren't you trying to get him the puck too?
Absolutely, especially when it's his second game and the kid's on fire. Well, you mentioned that Wade Allison kind of got his shot this week because there were a bunch of injuries in the Flyer system. That's not actually the only reason that the roster was a little thin and Wade Allison got called up, because the other thing that's happened since our last show, it was the trade deadline.
Yes.
And the roster did get a little thinner between our last show and the current show, because you traded Michael Raffl and you traded Eric Gustafsson. Was that it? Or was there one more?
No, just Raffl and Gustafsson.
It was just Raffl and Gustafsson. Okay.
No, what you're thinking of is the fact that there was technically a third move made on deadline day.
Right. You re-signed. The Philadelphia Flyers re-signed Scott Lawton. Right. Was the other transaction. But either way, you move Raffl, and maybe that's a spot that opened up for Allison, right?
Right, for sure. And I mean, that's what you were trying to do collectively is Michael Raffl was moved to open a forward spot, and Gustafsson was moved to open a defenseman spot, and that's it. That's the only thing about it, because now we spent part of the show talking about Cam York. If Cam York makes his debut in the next 3 weeks, it's because of a trade. Then
the Gustafsson trade was worth it.
Right. It's because of trading Eric Gustafsson that opened up the roster spot, that opened up the cap space, even by retaining. They retained salary on both.
Right.
Which, in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't matter.
When Comcast owns the team, it doesn't matter.
Well, no. What I'm saying is that it doesn't matter to cap hits because at the end of the year, they're gone anyway. You're retaining salary for the remainder of this year.
Right. They're both expiring UFAs. You traded them because you could retain, and it disappears at the end of the year.
Which, by the way, I did not know this until browsing Cap Friendly. Apparently, you're only allowed to retain salary on 3 contracts.
Correct.
So I didn't realize that was the thing. And maybe that's because the Flyers don't tend to retain salary too often in these deals.
See, you say but they were for a while, because for a while they were retaining on, I think Andrew McDonald still counted, or the buyout from Andrew.
Those are buyouts, though. So I knew about the buyouts.
Okay.
I'm talking about this is like when you make a trade and you say we're going to retain salary. Like they were.
Right, they retained on. They traded somebody to Montreal like 2 years ago, and they retained money. It was a weird deal.
Oh no! What you're thinking of is, and again, it's one that comes off the books this year. You're talking about they acquired David Schlemko, and then
that's the one
on him,
right?
Or not retained. They bought
in the
him
Dale Weiss deal,
right?
That was a buyout. Okay,
yeah, they bought him out, so they retained. No, the guy you're thinking of who they retained on was Gudis. They retained a little on Gudis.
I knew they retained on Gudis.
But that was over because his contract expired, and he went to Florida, so he's not on the books. So, I didn't realize, like, all we talked about was that was the only guy they were retaining salary on last year was Gudis. That was it. And it was, so you didn't really think too hard about, there's only 2 more spots left where you could retain. And not only that, but when the deadline hit, they weren't giving anybody away. So it didn't even come into question.
Well, and that's the thing, is you're only using your retention spots when you're selling assets, basically.
And you're only doing it pretty much especially in a year like this, when you're selling a guy who has less than a year left on his contract.
Generally speaking, in the NHL, you get one of 2 things for when teams retain salary. UFA or like a trade deadline deal, UFA, or trade deadline deal, but he's got a year left.
Right.
That's about the only time. And then there's the Phil Kessel deal, which for some reason the Toronto Maple Leafs are still paying $1.2 million of that salary. But they retained on that for like 7 years, whatever. That's a whole different situation. Most of the time, it's a year or half a year.
Right, exactly. And, and see, you're right. So here's the thing. The money that's still retained by the Flyers on both of those players is gone at the end of the year.
Right.
It's negligible. The buyouts are gone at the end of the year. Realistically, I mean, you've just by doing this whole thing right there, and granted, it doesn't make a big difference because in the same amount of time they were going to be off the books anyway. So the salary in full would have been off. But Michael Raffl makes $1.6 million. Gustafsson makes $3 million. You've got another $2.5 million in buyout money. Do the math, and you just opened up about $7 million.
That's a significant player in today's NHL.
And look, not for nothing, and I've had some people mention it to me, and it's the truth. No, Carter Hart's next deal is not going to be as big as everybody thought it was going to be. I think you're now in the bridge deal stage at this point.
Flat cap for the next couple of years.
And he's going to get that very, he's not going to make less than $1 million. I'll tell you that much.
No.
But you might be able to get away with $2 to $2.5 million now instead of the $5 million you thought you were going to have to pay or more. He's not getting the Matt Murray deal, right? That's what we're trying to get at.
We did touch on it briefly, but since we're discussing kind of future Flyers cap, the Scott Lawton extension kicks in next year, and he goes from $2.3 to $3 million, so he gets about a $700,000 raise.
Which is why I'm a little baffled at why people care so much to an extent. If you care, there's 2 reasons why you should care and maybe be negative about it. And that would be, 1, it's more of the same. You were kind of looking for much more of a shakeup.
Right.
And 2 is term, because in the grand scheme of things, it's a 5-year deal. And it's like
Devil's advocate says that long-term deals for bottom 6 players, which is what Scott Lawton has historically been, tend to not work out, right? And you point to the Jay Beagle deal in Vancouver and a couple of these other longer deals at a fairly low AAV. I think Jay Beagle's only making $3 million also. But the problem is Scott Lawton signed his deal at 27 and Jay Beagle signed that deal at 32. Right. And those are very different 5-year gaps, or very different 5-year chunks in a player's career.
Let's be real. And again, it's something that's come up. I've seen it through Twitter as I browse through. Sean Couturier's next contract, you've got to be careful because in the grand scheme of things, you're going to start it at the right time, but it's going to end probably at not the wrong time, but it's going to end in the twilight, right? And
the other thing you have to manage that same offseason
is Giroux.
Claude Giroux's next contract, which hopefully is not too long. And hopefully is not too much, but I'm a little nervous because we've had a lot of conversations about this franchise being loyal to a fault, and I'm a little bit worried about a long-term extension.
Claude Giroux's next contract needs to be Sean Couturier money currently with very low term.
Right. I think those two players need to take up about the same amount of cap that they currently do, but you can give Sean Couturier a raise in the exact same amount that Claude Giroux is getting a cut
to an extent, and that's
roughly.
The thing. But that's the thing. This is why it comes back to Giroux all the time, because Claude Giroux combined with Jake Voracek make up like something along the lines of, I forget how much the percentage is, but it's something ridiculous, like 20% of your cap or something like that. Right. And I'm throwing it out. It was mentioned. I've seen it before, but I don't know it off the top of my head. Now, if you made that Sean Couturier and blank take up 25% or 20% of your cap space or whatever it is,
it's not as much of a problem.
Right. It does it. We're
not because of how young Sean Couturier is.
No, but it feels like it balances out, I think is what it is. It's like it feels like then you sit there and you say, well, Sean Couturier is the two-way guy. He does play both ends better. And that's not completely what Claude Giroux is all about. Like, Claude Giroux is a decent two-way player.
He's solid defensively, I would say.
And I'd say that it's at this stage of his career. I'm not saying like he never was. I think he was better at a certain point. I think he's not as good of a defensive player anymore.
Yeah, that's fair to say.
And that's just the speed of the game gets faster. You don't sometimes. You know, it is what it is. But that being said, that's what I think it is with a lot, and I think the years that bother people, because it's 5 years of kind of saying more of the same, and it to me it's not like I don't view him as a second liner. I don't view him as a fourth liner where you're paying a fourth liner $3 million. I think you're paying a third liner $3 million, which in the grand scheme of things, Scott Lawton's making $3 million, Oscar Lindblom's making $3 million. That's where you start.
My evaluation of Scott Lawton has been pretty similar for about the last year or so. And it's that if he is your third line center, you probably have a very good team. But you're not embarrassed if he's on your second line sometimes, kind of like we saw in the bubble last year.
Right.
And that player, that kind of middle six, definitionally middle six guy, sometimes he's on your second power play unit type of player. That's the guy I'm talking about. You'll pay that guy $3 million every day of the week. Because that's the kind of guy that helps a team go from kind of the Boston situation where you have one good line and some depth to a good, solid top-to-bottom team. Scott Lawton is the kind of depth secondary scoring that good teams need.
I do also wonder if his penalty kill ability has anything to do with it. Look, the penalty kill's been awful.
It certainly should.
No, listen, the penalty kill's been awful this year collectively, but he's one of the guys that's been a staple of it for several years, and I feel like you can get him right, so to speak, more than other guys. Like I do think you're really. If Nick Aube-Kubel's not in the penalty box, then he's on the penalty kill, and I don't think that's working.
He should be in Lehigh Valley, but that's just me.
I don't. I believe he's got a 2-year deal that started this year. I wouldn't put it past him to move on from him this year.
Bye. I'll throw Seattle a pick. Please take them.
No, I wouldn't go that far, because if you're Seattle right now, you're doing everything you can to get a $7 million contract off your books. 7 to 8 mil. Like
you're right.
You're literally, if you can throw as much as you can at them to say, here, take Jake Voracek, take James Van Riemsdyk, you're doing it.
Yeah, I don't know how much you have to throw at them to get them to take James Van Riemsdyk at this point. He's had a good season. On a team that struggled, the fact that he has as many goals as he has.
He did, but he's older, and the contract is what it is. And and Van Riemsdyk specifically is more streaky.
Right. But what's that contract got left on it? 3 years after this one?
2, I think, actually.
2 years left after this one. Okay, so I think
it was a 5-year deal. He played because Hextall signed him. So the year Hextall got fired would have been his first year, I believe.
Okay.
Of the contract.
So this is year number 3.
And then last season they had obviously a lot of success. The irony is the team had a lot of success,
and he didn't.
And he was not really part of it.
So a year ago, I was sitting here talking about the Seattle draft, and I said I think the Flyers are going to be in the kind of spot to trade a first-round pick to Seattle to get them to take James Van Riemsdyk. And I think that's still the case, but I don't think it has to be a first-round pick anymore. I think you can get by with like a second-round pick because James Van Riemsdyk isn't of value. I have a feeling because the thing about Seattle is, right, if he's got 2 years left on his deal, they can take that deal, $7 million. If he's not good for them, or if they're not good, if they're not as successful as maybe Vegas was or that they're hoping to be, we talked about it earlier. You flip, you retain half. boom. James Van Riemsdyk at $3.5 million is a very attractive asset to a lot of teams in the NHL.
Yeah, potentially. I still wonder. I mean, Van Riemsdyk would satisfy the core thing to an extent. I still wonder if you really need to just sit there and say, you know what?
It's got to be Voracek.
Well, to make an impact. I mean, how much longer can you kind of go off of it? Like without making the obvious decision, or not the obvious decision, but the easiest way to do it, which is just don't re-sign Claude Giroux, which I can't see them doing.
They're not doing that.
No, I know, but that's what I'm trying to get at. Like, how else? Like, it continues. It will continue to be as it continues to be now. It will continue to be Giroux and Voracek's team until one of them is not there.
Right.
Like, I still don't even feel like it's Sean Couturier's team yet, and it should be.
I agree with you that I think Voracek, if the Flyers could choose, I think Voracek would be the player that they got rid of. The problem is they don't have a choice. Right? The problem is they can only protect X people, and you would like it's going to be one of these assets. But if it's James Van Riemsdyk in a second or Jake Voracek in a first, I don't know. I'm probably not giving up a first round pick. Right? If Seattle comes calling and they say, well, listen, we'll take James Van Riemsdyk, but we need a second round pick from you. Or we'll take Jake Voracek, but we need a first round pick from you. I don't know. I'm probably going James Van Riemsdyk in the second at that point, because I don't think I agree, but I think at that point you kind of just cut bait and ride it out and let Voracek's contract expire if you can't trade him.
Well, listen, let's be realistic for a moment. I'm not disappointed if the guy who goes to Seattle is James Van Riemsdyk, because at the end of the day, right before free agency hits, you're going to get another $7 million, because there is no, for the most part anyway, there is no salary retention from a new team. You know what I mean? Like, they're a new team. They've got to reach a cap space at some point. Like, they got to get into the cap frame of mind at some point in time. So somewhere out there's also going to be good players on cheap contracts that you're going to get, and that's what you'll do. You know what I mean? So, like,
they do also have to get to the cap floor.
Well, right. So you're going to have guys who make some money here, and maybe you do that with, ultimately with a guy like that. And I don't know. Maybe something changes. Van Riemsdyk's never played in what would be the Western Conference before. That could be something different. I don't,
because Vegas ended up taking Fleury, who was obviously making some money, and then wasn't Derek Engelland kind of their big?
Engelland was one of their first, but I don't recall him making a lot of money.
I thought he was. I remember they took at least somebody who was making too much money. Paul Stastny was there. His contract wasn't necessarily the best.
I thought Stastny was a trade, though.
Was he a trade? Maybe he was a trade. Vegas has traded so many people.
The difference, all right, so here's the biggest difference to me, and I also made a reference to this while talking about the Flyers on the radio earlier this week, because I turned around when they lost 6-1 to Washington again, I turned around and I even said, there's an element of that is almost expansion team-like. Like, expansion teams like Atlanta and Nashville in the beginning.
Get dumpstered like that.
Get thrown out, thrown around, blown out multiple times in a season early on, because the best thing that you have as a team is your draft picks, realistically. You were always
your
getting
homegrown talent.
Because you were always getting the lowest of the low from the other teams. You weren't getting this. There wasn't this. I don't want to say there wasn't this system, but you didn't have to expose people like you did.
Expansion teams were bad
because you didn't have to expose anybody with real talent, so to speak. And not real talent, but you know what I mean. Like, you didn't have to give up your most or consider your most talented guys. You know what I mean? Like, you didn't have to think about the possibility of, if you really wanted to, you were protecting 5 forwards from your top 6. You had to throw a guy from your top 9 in there to make it, or 1 or 2 guys from your top 9 in there to make it 7. And then, oh, by the way, you had to protect this kid who had come up and started his contract but wasn't with the team just yet or battled injury, so he wasn't on your roster. Like, you had to play that card, right? Like, so you're sitting there going, here's a guy who can physically and, mentally handle a top 9 role, maybe a top 6 role, but we can't protect him because we've already gone through the amount of time he has before he has to be protected. So we have to protect the other guys. Or you're sitting there with 4 really good defensemen, and that means you can only protect 4 forwards, so 2 of your top 6 are exposed. So you're giving up good players. Bottom line, you're giving up good players. Or even goalies, because a goalie, you might have 2 really good ones. You're going, I have no choice. I got to pick the one that I want to hold on to.
And the Flyers got lucky a couple years ago that a lot of their good young pieces weren't eligible, and you ended up losing Pierre-Edouard Bellemare, who at the time was, on your fourth line.
I'm still surprised that I believe that year they could have lost Lawton.
I believe so too.
And I'm surprised they didn't, unless I don't remember that they protected him.
Maybe there might have been a deal. I don't know.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I thought there was a deal involved. Well, but that was the only thing they got, wasn't it? Wasn't Bellemare the only thing they got? Because if not, there was supposed to be draft picks involved and stuff like that. Because remember Vegas ended up with 3 first-rounders that year? Maybe
Ron Hextall bought somebody a steak. I don't know. Because at the time it was Hextall, right?
Right. Well, because remember, this is what, in order to protect, this is what in Minnesota, this is what Chuck Fletcher did to make sure that certain guys didn't go. And ultimately what you ended up having happen was you ended up giving, I forget who the one piece was, but Alex Tuck was part of it, and Alex Tuck turned into a good player because he had to make that
the Florida Panthers were the worst because they said, here, we want you to take Riley Smith, so here also take Jonathan Marchessault. And then those guys ended up being absolute killers for Vegas.
What was the purpose of that? So they wouldn't take, so they wouldn't take a Barkov and a Huberdeau or something like that.
It was somebody. No, it was somebody specific, and I can't remember who it was. But it was so they could protect. Well, I don't remember who it was.
Right away at the time, I'm thinking of Huberdeau, Barkov, Dadonov were all part of the team.
Yeah. I don't remember who it was, but somebody they needed to protect somebody.
Was Mike Hoffman part of the team then?
It might have been. Mike Hoffman. No, he still would have been in Ottawa.
Yeah.
Either way, I remember they had to do something, and they ended up giving Vegas multiple very. Oh no, Columbus was the one. Columbus was the one that they. It was so they didn't give up somebody else because it was Carlson, and I think a first-round pick. So they didn't take.
No. I remember part of that deal. I thought it wasn't.
Wasn't it so they didn't take Seth Jones or something?
Probably. That would have been. Yeah. It would have been Jones and Werenski, and Werenski was still relatively new. So I don't know if he had to be exposed. But
I think that's the thing.
But I get the point, and I think didn't they give them David Clarkson's contract just so they had cap money? And it's
that was the thing.
We'll give you money to get to the cap floor. Here's William Karlsson.
They traded them William Karlsson and I think a pick so that they would select David Clarkson's contract. Right. That's what happened with Columbus, and they ended up giving William Karlsson a 42-goal season. Right, because William Karlsson a 42-goal season because that was
William Karlsson gave them a 42-goal season.
Wow. Columbus gave Vegas a 42-goal season in the form of William Karlsson. That season was crazy. That first Vegas run was absolutely wild.
In fairness, that season also got William Karlsson a $5.9 million cap hit for a 7-year or an 8-year deal.
It sure did. Good for him.
Although he still delivers, he's a good player.
Oh, he's a very good player. That contract, he's a very good player. That's not a bad contract at all.
That is the risk you take, though.
That is the risk you take.
Well, because William Karlsson right now is 28, but that was 3 years ago now. That was
something like that. I think he was 25 or 26 when he signed the deal.
I'm sorry, 4, because Vegas has had 3 playoff runs. They've made a cup final. They could have made another cup run if they didn't get knocked out in the first round in a game 7. And then they were They were conference final last year.
Hey, what was a worse 5-minute major? Logan Couture in that Western Conference final, or the Sam Moran game misconduct? The push.
Well, the Moran one was pretty bad, but
how is that a 5? I know we're not going to talk about it as a major show topic, but how on earth is that a 5?
Well, the officiating in this league is very suspect.
It's been poor.
This season. It's been really bad.
Either way, we have gone off the rails, and when we start talking about the refs, that means it's time to get out of here. Before we did get out of here, I wanted to mention our social medias, and before we do that, though, one more thing. Last night, we saw a little bit of NHL history in the form of Patrick Marleau tying Gordie Howe for number of games played.
Yeah.
1,767, I believe, is the number.
Hold on, I know the best place to pull it up because it's literally plastered all over the NHL's media site. Yeah, 1,768 will be the record.
Will be the record, and obviously it'll be more than that because Patrick Marleau isn't stopping anytime soon, I don't think. So we just kind of wanted to mention it, and he's not stopping this season. Right, the record's not going to stop at 68 because he's going to play more games this season.
No. I wouldn't be shocked if he comes back for another year. To be honest,
I completely agree. I wouldn't be surprised. I'm surprised they didn't trade him at the deadline so we could sign back with the Sharks in the offseason. If he wasn't going to break the record, they probably would have.
I think that has something to do with it, and I don't know. It's tough because here's a guy again who you wish would just go he should win something. But you know what? I've seen it. I've seen an argument like this a lot with Claude Giroux. So this is what it is. A lot of players who are deemed really good in this league, possibly close to superstar quality or very good. These guys who build really good established careers. A lot of players have Hall of Fame level careers that don't win the Stanley Cup. It just it happens.
Yep. Well, and there's a chance that that's going to go down as Patrick Marleau's legacy, and they've tried to ship him around and get him a cup before, and
I didn't say you're right. They've tried because Toronto is certainly one spot with it, and now Joe Thornton's taking that place.
Yep, and he was in Pittsburgh for half a year last year. They have no problem trading him to where they think he can win.
But there's another guy right there I just mentioned. Joe Thornton's another one. Player he's going to go into the Hall of Fame. Is he going to win a cup? That's what's left to find out.
I think Joe Thornton might win the one this year, but
I think they're trying to go for it this year.
We're not an NHL show. You can listen to Open Ice Hits with Hunter Brody for that.
We specifically talked about that team. We mentioned the.
But I'm sure you guys talked a lot about the trade deadline and the Toronto Maple Leafs, and they are gearing up. Do you want to face off? Do you want to face off against a fourth line of Joe Thornton, Wayne Simmons, and Nick Foligno in the playoffs?
I don't think that'll be their fourth line.
No, but it certainly could be.
That would be the ultimate grinder line. Jeez.
And in the playoffs, do you want to play a 7-game series against that line? No, you don't.
I already don't want to play a 7-game series against Austin Matthews. Now,
no kidding.
Put those guys with it. Geez,
that team's scary.
Yeah, I know.
And they're good defensively for once.
So here's the thing about you bringing up Open Ice Hits really quick.
Okay.
Because our whole last show was based around, we didn't record on our usual time slot. We waited, we held off, we went, why not? Why do the show on Monday or just
for Monday, it to get trade deadline?
Just for to speculate. Let's just do it after the deadline. So we go and we do a show last Tuesday, and that was when we did the show. We did it Tuesday morning. So deadline's over. We start talking about deadline stuff. Okay, great. We were planning to do another show last week that kind of got pushed off to this week because Broads has been doing a couple of other things going on around his thing. Obviously, he's doing weekends on Philly radio for one. He's doing post. By the way, I also mentioned in discussing it with one of the producers at the station who was kind of asking hey, when was the last episode, or have you recorded a new one since, or whatever. That I would suspect that since he does a post-game podcast and does a video for every game typically in the city, that keeping up with the Sixers games, keeping up with Phillies games, doing a show, by the way, that is sponsored that leads into Phillies games on weeknights. So he's got all those things that are actually trying to help make him some money.
Right.
In addition to that he's probably just a little bit hockeyed out right now, doing it about the Flyer season specifically and saying, "Oh, I'm going to make a video for another 6-1 loss."
I can't really blame you.
Probably not feeling it, so he hasn't this weekend. I ended up sending him a message. It was Thursday night going into Friday because we were kind of talking about staggering the thing by 3 days again. Same thing we always did. So instead of Monday, Thursday, let's do Tuesday, Friday, for example.
Right.
So I texted him on Thursday night, and I'm like, "Were we still planning to record tomorrow?" Honestly, not trying to push. Just going, I don't care if we are or not. I just want to know what time I'm getting up in the morning because I'll either be able to sleep in a little bit more than usual, or not. I'll get up at 7 a.m. and we'll do the show. And he goes, "Well, crap! I totally forgot. I'm doing a Twitch stream playing the show until 2 o'clock in the morning. So I don't." He goes, "That 7:30 wake up call is gonna be real." And he actually even the next morning he even canceled his. He usually does a coffee show where he just live streams and takes comments and chats with people. Not chats with people.
And he nixed that too.
He ended up nixing that one the next morning too. So
okay.
Ultimately we're a little bit off schedule with it, but I'm saying my guess would be in reality the way the Flyer season has gone has kind of been a hockey turnoff So trying to sit there and getting amped up to talk hockey is a thing, but it's also like I think he has turned his attention to, we've got 3 weeks left until the playoffs hit, and playoff hockey is going to be exciting, and it'll be better, I guess, knowing that the Flyers are not participating. Like, that we're getting
the playoffs are going to be a lot of fun this year.
You know, and I'm like, look, of course we'd love for the Flyers to be participating, but the point being, since but since that takes an element of what he has to talk about away, it almost becomes the replacement. Like, we can do this podcast twice a week to talk playoff hockey because the Flyers aren't playing every other night.
Totally.
Like, the schedule is just, honestly, I will not miss this scheduling if they go back to October to April and let's play 82 with more separation. Like,
and I think that's the plan.
It's been pretty brutal.
As usual, you know, all our listeners, we'll make sure to redirect them over to Open Ice Hits. You can find that pretty much everywhere, right? It's on Kevin's.
I do share it, but I also if you want to, I'll give him a shout too. Broads Media is the name of the social media.
Absolutely.
He's on Twitter now with that. He's on Instagram with that, I believe. I'm not sure about Facebook, things like that, but you know, Facebook's not really the popular one anymore anyway.
Well, either way, listeners of the show, by now they definitely follow you at Kevin_Durso, so all the information is over there.
Yep.
If you don't, make sure to drop a follow. You can also follow the show at YWT Podcast, and that's pretty much everywhere. Facebook, Instagram, Podbean, iTunes, Google Podcasts, SportsTalkPhilly.com. Make sure to follow them at SportsTalkPHL. And that's going to do it for us this week. We will be back next week. We will still be here weekly through the end of the season. Maybe not much after that. We might be going back to our summer schedule pretty quickly. The team's pretty depressing. We're ready to go into our summer schedule, I think.
Look, we sat there and we kind of hinted at previously when we weren't sure what kind of thing was going to happen with this team, if any big change was coming or whatever. We kind of hinted at, like, if something happens that requires us to hop on midweek and do an emergency
then we'll jump on and do a show.
We will. So that might be our off-season plan, is we're just going to do our usual summer schedule, and if something happens, we'll go, oh, hey, by the way, we're going to hop on and do a random show because something happened. You know?
Yeah, so make sure to subscribe to us everywhere, including on YouTube, so you can catch our episodes as soon as they go up if we do end up doing any of those surprise midweek episodes.
Yep.
And until then, I think that's just about it for this week. A couple games this week. Flyers actually have a couple days off, so, you know, we're going to go at least 3 days this week without seeing a Flyers loss, and that's kind of nice.
And there won't be much to talk about next week either because there's only 2 games. So
probably not.
Realistically, I mean, there's a game on Sunday again. We're going to do what we did before.
Right, so
this is pre-Sunday.
Next week we're going off the rails again. So good luck, and we'll see you next week.